I overheard you in the car when I think Ma asked you when you came out here. You said 1935.
Yeah.
How did you have to come out here to North Dakota?
No, I was riding with one of Carl Schmidt's cousins, and he came out for a vacation, and then put in harvest. So we landed. When we came out, we landed first at Marie Waltz's over there in 41.
You one of Carl Schmidt's cousins. You came out here because you were playing with him.
Yeah, I rode out with him. See, he came out, and there was two of us other guys rode along with him. He had a 29 Chevy Coupe, and then we landed over in 41 by Marie Waltz, and then the next day, and we came over here to Carl Schmidt's, and we all worked for Carl for a few days, and afterwards Walter Schmidt wanted somebody, and I went to work for Walter Schmidt. So probably.
Did you come out? Were you the only one in the family who came out at that time, or were you?
Of my family, yeah.
Why did you happen to pick North Dakota, though?
Well, because he was coming out. That was his cousin, and he was taking a vacation, going to see him, and then he only took in harvest. He did that before. He always liked to take in harvest.
How?
He did that a number of years before already. And then one year, this Anna Mushan down here, he took her back to the city. She rode back with him. And he always came every once in a while. He'd come out and visit the Schmidts.
When in '35, when you came out, did you stay out here then from that point on, or did you make trips back and forth?
Well, I stayed out here, and we just went back and forth to visit. No, that's about all I'd say. Only time we went back and forth, and I and Vera was married, and we went down there for a visit. So.
Can you describe Clownsburg as it was when you got out here in '35?
Describe it, how?
Well, there were elevators, and
yeah, there was 2 elevators here yet then, and depot was here, and well, there was an old lumberyard building down here yet too, and of course there's where I stayed, in the lumberyard building, and then Albert Zingers lived. The house stood about where my gas barrel was. They lived up here, see, at that time. So see, when I worked for Walter Schmidt, see, I lived in the lumberyard business. My bed and stuff was in there, and they lived across right over that little house back to church there, where Walter Schmitz lived. So you'd not have to walk over there for meals.
Who ran the store during that time?
Henry Rapper.
He had it then?
He had the store when I first came out here. Store in Pool Hall was in back. And I know when I came out here, and Kelly Schmidt and Ethel Zinter, they happened to be running it. I think Henry was maybe in the mine getting groceries or something. But anyhow, they were running the store when we stopped it first day when we got out here to Carl Schmidt's. So.
Was the bank operating then?
No, the bank was out. It was church.
It was already.
Yeah, it was. We went to church there already when I was out here, because they used to have German church in the morning and then English afterwards. And I didn't know that. And then when I went to church, why? I thought it was when they're over. Well, see, well then they left out, and then the English went on afterwards. See, so I had.
Could you speak German?
No, I never spoke any German. See, I was a kid, 4 years old when the last World War, our First World War ended, and them old Germans didn't dare open their mouth. So the folks always talked, and there was something they didn't want us to know. They talked German between themselves, and us later ones, we never, last 6 or 7, we never taught German.
Was there anything else here in Kongsberg? Do they have anything connected with, say, livestock or anything like that?
No, they used to have a shipping yard down here.
Did they?
They had the shipping yard. They shipped the livestock out of the
Hmm.
yards down here, and for a number of years, still not too long ago, they took that stockyard out of here.
Hmm.
I shipped cattle out of here yet.
Hmm. Yeah.
Grandpa was already in Minot then, and I took a couple carloads of cattle down to St. Paul out of these stockyards.
Did, let's see, something came to mind. Do you know how many people were actually living here in Kongsberg when you came on the scene here? Did you guess that?
Well, there was Inters, there was 4 of them, 2 kids and themselves, and there was heirs. I don't know how many heirs there was, but there was... How many kids has heirs got, Vera? And,
What?
yeah, Dick Ayers, how many kids did they have? They were all here.
4 girls.
Yeah, there was 4. So that'd have been about 6 of the heirs living here. And Henry Rapp lived over there. Let's see. Oh yeah, I think the elevator man came here. Of course, they were here one time. George Colvin lived in that house, the first house you see there. And Walter Schmidt run the one elevator. I think George Colvin run the O&M elevator, and the other one run the farmer's elevator, whatever it was. So.
Yeah, still a small town at that time.
Yeah.
When did you first meet Richard Kobernick?
Well, see, when we come out here, and then we worked for Carl Schmidt maybe a week or longer, and then I went working for Walter Schmidt. But anyhow, Carl Schmidt, see, we come out here in intention to harvest, and he made us acquainted. Carl Schmidt did with Kobernick because he had the thrashing rig.
Oh.
And we went thrashing on his rig and I hauled bundles.
How did you go about getting hired to do that? I mean, he introduced you, and then did you come to some sort of a agreement on how long and how much and that
No,
sort of thing?
he just it just seemed like he knew we were looking for a job and he needed men, and then I was working for Walter Schmidt, so he hired Walter Schmidt's team, and then I drove them and hauled bundles, and the other, Carl Ortwick, had I think drove one of old Richard's teams, and so did we had another kid came out, Wilbur Tracer was his name, and he drove one of the Kobernick's teams. So that's how we got started. We worked on Kobernick's machine.
And that was in the fall of '35.
And then, then my buddies, they went to Washington picking apples, and I stayed out here. And I worked for Kobernick. He wanted somebody to haul corn stalks up from the original place to up there, help Walter. So then I volunteered for the job because I wanted to see if I liked it out here.
How much how much were you paid in that fall?
Well, harvest time we was paid $2 a day. And $1 a day they got for teams. For the team, and we was paid $2 a day for driving them in pits and bundles.
Was that an average wage at the time?
Yeah, that's what.
That was pretty much what the going wage was?
Yeah, that was the going wage, pretty much. So some got paid by the hour. Well, we got paid by the day. Some got paid by the hour, and they didn't seem to make as much by the hour because sometimes they broke down and they had we cut, the day, the hours, so that some of them didn't get in the full hours. But Kobernick, they also paid by the day because then when he moved, he also tried to move when it was dinner time or different times, and they'd work it right in, and he didn't. And if there was a belt jumped off or something, some of them, they would knock them 15 minutes or half an hour, and this way he just paid straight through by the day and never took. Sometimes we maybe finished the job too later, but one time we go over to Emil Fisher that we maybe thrashed till 9 o'clock because he wanted to get it through. And I know they opened up the machine and we pitched from both sides, and there was bundles going over the top of the separator. He wanted it on the straw pile. The wheat was awful light that year, you know. Some of it was only 35-pound wheat.
What was a normal day? How long? When did you start work?
Oh, I don't know. We started maybe from, I would say it could have been about 8 o'clock. That we was go to the fields anywhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, and then well, it depends on what we was doing. Generally about 7 o'clock is when we quit, I think. So I tried to, sometimes it'd be 9 o'clock. We were finishing at one place.
Did when you started working then that summer on that thrashing rig, did you still live where you were living, or did you go out to live out there?
No, when we went on the thrash machine, see, then we went along with the machine, and wherever we was thrashing, we stayed there in the barns or lived in the barns, and then that went on until a few of the last places. Then he had a different spike pitcher. Quit and went to school, and then I started spike pitching for Copenhagen.
Now what's the? I haven't heard that term before.
Well, see, they drove now like it was on this little machine years ago. On the big machines, they had maybe 12 teams, 6 coming on each side. See, one pulled up on one side and was pitching, and then till the other one got in, and then they pitched from both sides. See, then there was 2 men pitching in machines. Well, now this little machine, he had 6 teams, 3 on each side, and then a spike pitcher, and we only unloaded 1 load at a time, see. I stood in the back and pitched off, and then the teamster pitched off, see, and then by that way, then the other team come in and could pull up, see, and while he could start pitching in while I was climbing up on the rack, and the other finished the load off, see. Sometimes then we had to clean up around the machine too, if some fell down, loose stuff, and we cleaned up on the machine and then climb up, and well, that fellow was up there ready pitching.
How many bundles were on a load?
Oh, that's a hard question. Quite a few. We had put on quite good sized shocks. Maybe there was 10 in a shock each. I don't know. I would guess from 100 to 125, because we'd sometimes put on from 8 to 10 shots, maybe, or better.
How long would it take you to go through one load? I mean, to pitch it all up?
I don't know what to say there. I would judge it probably took a half an hour.
Half an hour?
To get, you mean to load it, to get it pitched on, get up there. It's about what I would
about
judge.
Half an hour.
Yeah. It took a good half hour.
Is that how most of the thrashing was done? Bringing the...
that time, yeah.
That time.
It was done.
There's another kind, isn't it called stack thrashing, where they...
Oh yeah, that too.
Did they do any of that around here?
Not so much. When there was a poor crop there in '36, then a lot of them cut the header stacks. Well, that was loose stuff. That was thrashed separate. But that stack thrashing, I think what you think, that was more done like down east, like in Wisconsin there. We used to stack all our grain, and then the thrash machine would come in and thrash it.
Minnesota did that too, I've heard that.
Yeah, that's the way they did down east.
What kind of a thrashing machine did he use?
Yeah, the International. 28 machine. When I was there, he used to thrash with the big machine, Reeves. I think that was a 44 Reeves. what he had first with the steam engine.
Now, when you came, did he still have the steam engine?
Yeah, he had the steam engine.
Did he use that?
But he never used it. It was stationary back in Walter's garage there. We're standing in. And then he sold it for junk, and I got the whistle off in the steam engine.
Oh.
Yeah, so I got that for remembrance. Nobody wanted it, and I asked him for it, and I got the whistle. So that's a brass whistle.
Oh.
So.
Sure. Yeah, there aren't many of those around anymore.
No. It's funny, that was a good old steam engine too, but they wrecked them all.
Yeah, cut them up, I suppose, scrapped them.
Took all the babbitt out for lead, and them days lead was worth a lot of money. They took them all apart.
Yes. If he didn't use that steam engine for power, then what did he use?
Well, he bought the separator. He had bought that some years before, maybe 3 years before I came out here. Then he had bought a 22 International tractor, and then the separator. And the first, he got the tractor, and he was going to finish cutting grain, and he run it, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, and it went to pot right away. And so then they come out and put a new engine in, and he run it a couple of days more on just, he had 2 binders behind it, and she blew up again. Of course, by that time, old Richard was pretty peeved. I heard all that Reuben Griswold and him went up to the International. They invited, they had that big place, you know. And old Reuben says, I hid behind some machinery there, and let old Richard go to him. And he told him he didn't want the thing on the place, he'd come and get it. And they come out, they brought him a brand new tractor out then. Instead of replacing it again, they brought a brand new tractor out, and that stood up. They went thrashing with that. It was a 28-inch International separator and a 2236 engine he pulled it with. So then, well, I thrashed with him a couple of years then. And of course, I and Vera got acquainted. Well, she come up to help her mother there then when we thrashed old Richard stuff.
Now you say she came up to help her mother. Did her mother follow the thrashing crew and cook for them, or what?
No, that time, see, well, he had this little machine. Before that, when he had the steam engine, you know, they had a cook car, and I guess Mrs. Inter and some of them followed, did the cooking with the cook car, the way I understand. But with the steam engine. But now, when he bought this little machine, then they didn't run no more cook car. And every place we went, they had to furnish the feed, you know.
Oh, I see.
They did the cooking. That's why you hear so much places. I know Walter Smith and them always told years ago that, like these Russians, they'd chop the head off a chicken, put chicken and all in, and make soup, and they were supposed to eat that. And then Walter Smith just telling, they must have run into some awful stuff, because wake up, he says his crew was eating supper, and they got there that day, and they ate supper at this one place at night, and they was all spitting these, like years ago, you maybe didn't, but a lot of times the bread, they didn't mix enough, had them doughy chunks, and they were spitting out them doughy chunks. And then he says when they got the cap and went out to the shed, they had flour bells years ago, and he says, here sit the flour bell, and an old hen with 6 or 8 chicks sitting around on top of that flour bell, and so you can imagine where them doughy chunks go for the bread.
Oh, gee.
So that's the story they tell us. Kind of, yeah, and well, I know there's a lot of men used to tell about how, you know, them Russians, they get there, some of them was pretty tough.
Well, that sounds pretty, yeah.
But it was rough. The Russians, you know, they didn't have so much. They come over here and they were rough people. It took a while. About the time when his little rig come in, then it was getting better. All right, I guess it was a lot of them kicking on it. They couldn't get thrashed because people wouldn't go with it.
Oh, I see. They just
or didn't care. Only thing that they were really forced. See, there's a law. You couldn't let nobody sit. You couldn't go around one farmer and let him sit there. They had to thrash him. They had to see that he got thrashed. If you had a machine and was thrashing the country, you couldn't let him sit. But he could go someplace else and hire somebody, but you couldn't let him sit as long as you owned the machine. So.
How did they determine who was going to thrash who?
Well, them days, the farmers come around and asked, or else the thrasher either went around to the farmers, like they had certain territories where they thrashed in. It'd be just like when I go out selling corn. They went around and then they would, like Kobe, generally once he'd start out over in his end there and go around the neighborhood here, and then the next year he probably started on the other end. Then they were last or first that way. And well, some of them, you know, if they weren't satisfied or some of them kicked, sometimes they got another machine in too in there. But he generally had this certain territory what he had. Once in a while, some of the other ones.
How did it work with? Now I'm assuming he furnished the machine and the men and did all the threshing. He was paid by what? By the bushel?
Yeah, but except 35. I think then he charged charged by the hour thrashing. About $6 an hour he got for that. But otherwise it was like for barley it was about 10-11 cents a bushel, and wheat probably was 12-13 cents a bushel. Otherwise when you thrash by the bushel. And we'd thrash all the way from 1,400 bushels to 1,600 bushels a day out of wheat. Again, they thrashed. Anyhow, he always figured he should make $100 with the machine a day to come out on it. That's what he figured.
That would be break even.
Well,
or to make a profit.
Yeah, he had to make about $100 a day to come out on it, you know, for a man. And so,
did they pay him up front, or did they pay him after they sold their grain?
Well, a lot of them, I think they were supposed to pay him when he got through thrashing, or about that time. A lot of them, well, they all got the hours, you know, unless they talked to him. Some of them, he generally would wait till after he was done with the run and then go around and collect. You know, some paid him right away and some didn't. But that's the way we'll say maybe 20-30 days later. So he generally had about a 25-30 day run, like when I came out here.
So they were working let's say a month. He was out threshing a solid month.
About that, that's about it was average when I come out. But before when they had the big machine, I think they thrashed longer than too.
He had bigger route then?
And then yeah, sometimes they were way out where we were today, way out to the lake country, and traveled, you know, with the steam engine. They had bigger routes, I think, them days. Because they thrashed way in November in snowstorms and floods and stuff years ago.
Oh, really? They went that late for that sort of thing. Huh. Did they, let's say in an area around, I don't know, in this general area, between here and Butte, how many people were out threshing? I mean, how many crews? Yeah, I mean, how many people were like Richard, had a machine and was out hired themselves out?
we'll see in this area around, or maybe like in about a, I don't know, you say a township area, maybe a township area about, there could be 5, 6 machines in there. Different machines, you know, could have been. They'd get them in there. I know we were thrashing here, and I know I can remember about 4 machines now here in 35 that we knew of around the country. Over here on the hill where you can see we say Esfield Unswash, there was a French roll used to come in there and thrash, and then there was another one thrash. What was their names yet? I don't know.
Well, why was it? I mean, was it a good business? I mean, was Richard in there because it was a profitable business for him? I mean, was it good business sense to get into that?
He must have been had that in his blood, thrashing, and they had to have machines. Otherwise, first years, I guess he hired, and then machines went out to country, and well, it was quite expensive. And this way, when they got their own machine, they could earn their own thrashing. And so, him and Emil and Albert Zinter, they bought into this machine. They bought the steam engine come way over here by Bergen country, I guess, out there, and then they run the machine themselves. They started out with the steam engine, you know, and of course, they, like you say, they had to make money to do that. That way, they could pay for their own trash, and they'd get that paid for somehow. It wasn't so profitable, but
well, when you you had worked then the first season at 35, you worked the full season for Kobernick then?
And then I stayed on when we got through thrashing. Then I stayed on working hauled hay for the cattle and fed his black cattle that winter.
What was he like to work for? That first year when you worked for him, how'd you find him as a boss?
Oh, he was a wonderful boss.
Was he?
I worked for him for room and board the first winter I was out here, and I know that he gave me in Christmas time he gave me I think it was $10 for a bonus, and then a lot of times when we was hauling there in the winter, and one time he got about 40 below zero, and I know he brought out from Henry Rapp's store, I and Walter, a pair of moccasins. We wore them days, they had moccasins on for our feet. Things like that every once in a while they bring out, and I got it. Of course, I was working for nothing, for my room and board, you know. So.
How was he? How did he boss the threshing crew itself, the whole crew? Was he right there in there working, or did he stand there like
he run his own machine. He run his own machine, and he's standing on top, and it seemed the men, they're all willing to work. And if there was some, not my day, but I guess in the big machine days, they had a lot of them, what they call IGIs or something. Well, a lot of times they got their walking papers, because one fellow stood his horses. He was thrashing the Franz Rensen down here in the middle of the field, left the horse down. He walked way up here to the depot, stood here, and the toilets had to go to the toilet and let the team stand down there alone. And of course, that guy, he was pretty foxy. He didn't get any. When you thrashed or hauled bundles, you know, you had turns to drive in, you know. Now there was 6 horses, but that fellow was ahead of you, followed him up, and that's where you kept all day. You had to keep your turn up in there. You couldn't just miss a turn and let them make the other fellow go in. So that's the way they did that.
Did he? Was he generally Did the days go pretty smoothly, or
Oh yeah.
was he the type of person to
He was
keep on the men, or did he just let them
No,
work and not say anything until they were having a problem, or?
I mean, the men usually always done what he wanted. They knew what he expected. Now in my day, they knew what they were expected of him. He didn't really have no problem with anything like that. Because everybody come there usually had too many men working for him, and everybody wanted a job from him. He paid his men, and he was good to them. I mean,
what did he expect out of them? I mean, did
just
he?
a normal day's work. I mean, when they
No more, no less.
no, when they keep their end up and keep going. And he was always jolly and kidding them.
So he was a good, in a good mood.
Yeah,
when he was out working.
Pretty good mood. He never showed anything unless somebody just wanted to pull something, years ago. But in my day, they didn't pull anything on him.
You didn't? You don't remember?
No. He had good men, and he treated them good. And when he'd asked them why they, like a lot of times, when he did crash late, if they were finishing up at one place and it took maybe an hour longer, why, he generally talked them in. They were all willing to work for him. And then a lot of days, we maybe moved at 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, the other teams that worked by the hour, they got deducted, see. Well, then we moved. He moved as fast as he could. A lot of times he'd move over noon hour too and different stuff. We got our day's pay right through, and then maybe once in a while when we put a longer day in, well, that was to be expected. But everybody seemed to work.